I mean, despite everything, you kind of have to ask the question, why did the Tigers want to sign a 37-year-old that hasn't played the comp in 15 years? Hello guys, it's 1099 here and welcome to today's video, and today we're going to go through our tips and predictions for round 17 of the 2026 NRL season. Last week had some expected results, but some shocking upsets as we try to look to improve and probably try to get another perfect round, which we don't know if will happen, but we'll have to keep going. So without further ado, let's get into the round. Starting on Thursday night, we have the Parramatta Eels taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs, with both teams coming off a bye. No real outs for either team, so both teams just look like pretty much their strongest sides. Obviously, there is the big elephant in the room with Latrell Mitchell, who is also injured, but obviously it turns out the injury is now going to rule him out until Game 3, so that means that Latrell Mitchell is probably not going to be playing in the decider, which is just always convenient. Now, a win for the Rabbitohs would get them onto 22 points, which would have them in the same sort of rankings as the Knights, the Roosters, and the Dolphins. Whilst a win for the Eels would jump them up to 16 points, which would have them alongside the Storm and the Bulldogs. Obviously, this is depending on all the other teams not winning. So I think this would be quite an interesting one in terms of who I think could win this. I might just give the edge out to Souths, but it's one of those weird ones where you got to have to question everything. Now we go into the Friday matches as we have the 6 p.m. kickoff between the Gold Coast Titans and the Canterbury Bulldogs. The Titans are coming off a 1-point win over the Penrith Panthers, while the Bulldogs are coming off a 1-point win this time against the Manly Sea Eagles. Now, in terms of some of the changes, Cooper Bai and Jensen Tamupau is out for the Titans, whilst Alice Conte and Satili Tupanua are out for the Bulldogs. No real other changes to say from that, but Tina Vasumalawi is in the side. So yeah, pretty much a beefed up two sides. It's going to be an interesting one. Stephen Crichton at 5'8", as well, it's going to be pretty prevalent. He's going to be needed for the Blues. A win for the Bulldogs will get them on 18 points, which would have them situated just knocking on the doors of the top 8. Whilst a win for the Titans will get them on to 14 points, which could see them jump up past the Broncos into 13th, and obviously it's maybe a little bit lower depending on what happens with the Eels, but they could jump up a position with their for and against being better than the Eels and the Broncos, determine another results. Game's also very even, but I think that the Bulldogs are probably going to be wanting it just a little bit more, and I'm going to say that I think the Bulldogs get the job done. But again, it should be another interesting close one, to say the least, because, I mean, Bulldogs are going to now start trying for the finals. And now we go to the 8 p.m. game on the Friday as we have the Brisbane Broncos taking on the Sydney Roosters. Now, the Broncos are coming off a bye, whilst the Roosters are coming off a 19-point win over the Cronulla Sharks. And we're going to start seeing most of the Origin stars sort of come back, so this will be a very interesting test for the Broncos as well as the Roosters. I should have just said both. In terms of injuries, there is unfortunately quite a few for the Broncos, as Adam Reynolds, Ezra Mam are both out, which is going to see us having the playmakers of Tom Duffy and Ben Hunt, with Corey Pies at the 9. And they're taking on essentially just the full-strength Roosters team. As much as I'd like to say that I think the Broncos could be able to try to restart their season and whatnot, I just think the Roosters are going to be too good for them, and I think they're really going to cement themselves as being, top 4. So I'm going to say the Roosters. And now we go to Saturday, 3 p.m. for quite possibly one of the bigger matches this season. It is third versus second. It is the Dolphins taking on the Warriors. Now, the Warriors are coming off an 18-point win over the North Queensland Cowboys in Christchurch, basically now making it all but confirmed that they're going to be a second team in New Zealand, whilst the Dolphins are coming off a 14-point win against the West Tigers in Campbelltown. Now, in terms of selections, you got Hamisa Tuwaifudo, Isaiah Katela, Max Plaff, Selwyn Cobbo, and Thomas Flegler in for the Dolphins, with the only outs being John Finamagofo and Tom Gilbert. Ins for the Warriors, you got Kurt Capewell, who's back from Origin, but a big out for the Warriors being Jackson Ford. A win for the Dolphins would have them tied with the Warriors in second place. Depending on how big of a win it is going to be whether or not their for and against will over the top of them. Because it is currently 41, meaning that a 21-point or above win is going to be what puts the Dolphins potentially in second. But in going to this, it also would open the gap up for the Panthers to start pulling away. It's very chaotic. I'm going to go and say I think the Dolphins might actually do it. It's just annoying. The one time I predict them to not make the finals, they do that. So, yeah, it sucks. And speaking of the Penrith Panthers, they're in the 5:30 matchup as they play up at Townsville against the North Queensland Cowboys. As I mentioned in the previous game, the North Queensland Cowboys are coming off an 18-point loss to the Warriors in Christchurch, whilst the Penrith Panthers are coming off a 1-point loss to the Gold Coast Titans, and one of their players viscerating, I guess is the only way to describe it. In terms of ends, it's Ethan King, Jackson Paul and Liam Sutton in for the Cowboys, while Brian To'o, Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Cleary are in for the Panthers. So, yeah, this is going to be one of those big games. I mean, this is a pretty much must-win for the Cowboys, who are situated in 9th place. This is to try to get them into the finals positionings. But a win for the Panthers, especially depending on what happens between the Dolphins and the Warriors, could make it a 6-point gap between them and second, which basically was going to put a major foothold in the Penrith Panthers getting the minor premiership. So in saying that, I'm going to say that, sorry Cowboys fans, I think the Penrith Panthers are going to win this game because, yeah, they copped what happened last week and they need to get revenge. And now we go to the 7:35 kickoff on the Saturday, and it is the Manly Seagulls up against the Melbourne Storm at Brookvale Oval. Gee, I wonder if it's the anniversary for it. It's the 15-year anniversary of the Battle of Brookvale. It's going to be pretty exciting to see. And also, both teams kind of have a lot more to try to gain from this season. Manly are coming off probably one of the more disappointing performances they've had ever since Kieran Foran came in at a 1-point loss to the Bulldogs, whilst the Melbourne Storm are coming off a 22-point win over the Canberra Raiders. In terms of ins and outs, there is a pretty distinctful outs for both teams, as you see the Seagulls, Kobe Hetherington, Ruben Garrick and Brandon Wakeham out for Manly, whilst Jerome Hughes is out for the Storm, which will see Tyron Wishart come in at the number 7. So this, yeah, very important match for both teams. Currently, Manly are the favourites. A win for Manly will get them up to 22 points, which you have them alongside, you know, the Knights, Roosters, Dolphins, obviously depending on what else happens. But a win for the Storm will get them right alongside the teams trying to vie into the top 8, because they can't afford a gap to start opening up. There's going to be a lot of desperation from both teams, which might see a little bit, you know, a bit of argy-bargy or whatnot. But I'm going to say, in an against the grain decision, I'm going to say I think Melbourne just edge it out. I think it's going to be a very close game, but I just think Melbourne, something happens when they're at desperation. I think they might be able to get the job done. And then we go to Sunday, where at 2 p.m. we have the almost a spoon bowl. 16th versus 17th. It is the Canberra Raiders taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Now, as mentioned in the previous game, the Canberra Raiders coming off a 22-point loss to the Melbourne Storm, whilst the St. George Illawarra Dragons fought valiantly in a 2-point loss to the Newcastle Knights. Now, unfortunately for fans of lorries, there is no lorries in this game. Dane Laurie is out for the Raiders, and Blake Laurie is out for the Dragons. I'm sorry I had to break that news to you. But fair, decent ends. Simi Sasaki in for the Raiders. That's good. About a couple other players. For the Dragons, Tuapolotu and Hamiselli in for the St. George, especially with Tuapolotu, who was in the New South Wales Cup game for the Dragons against the Knights last week. Now, pretty much it's safe to say that a loss for the Dragons is really going to have problems with them trying to avoid the wooden spoon. And a win for the Raiders is just going to help them try to avoid it, make an 8-point gap. I really want to say that I think the Dragons will win this. You know what? I am. The Dragons are going to win this game. And it's made a Dutch angle. That means something's off. It's going to be an off game. That's film theory for you. And then we go into the final game of the round, 4:05 p.m. Sunday afternoon kickoff in Newcastle. Probably one of the best spots for it. It is, of course, the Newcastle Knights taking on the West Tigers. Now, the Newcastle Knights are coming off a 2-point win over the St. George Illawarra Dragons. And honestly, they played pretty terribly. I think they need to switch on more whilst the West Tigers coming off a 14-point loss to the Dolphins. Now, in terms of changes to this game, Dylan Lucas, Jermaine McEwen, Kalen Ponga and Lachlan Crouch are in for the Knights, with Tyson Gamble being out. And in terms of outs for the West Tigers, you got Heath Mason, Jock Madden, Patrick Herbert. But you got a decent amount of ins as well. You got Adam Dewey, Twal, Valentino Tavana, Latafanu, Gerald Skelton. You got some good players involved in there. But no 37-year-old. I think this match is going to be very interesting. The Knights need to switch on, especially with, to be honest, them almost losing to the Wooden Spooners. I think the Knights just need to try to switch on. I mean, they've got Lucas and Ponga back, so might be okay. Tigers obviously also finding to try to get back into the top 8 circle. I'm kind of hoping this becomes a bit of reverse psychology, but I just think the Tigers are just going to edge it out. I don't know why, I just think they will. But if they don't, then I'm also happy with that result. Anyway, those are the predictions for round 17. Who do you guys have? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.